Everyone. So this is another episode of Martech Matters. And today with us, we have Betsy Frost. She is the Chief Marketing Officer for Dry Soda. She studied at Brown University. She got her MBA from Virginia Darden School of Business. She worked at the Motley Fool in the early 2000s, and she's held multiple senior marketing positions for General Mills. And like I mentioned, she is now the Chief Marketing Officer for Dry Soda. So we're excited to have her on the show and learn more about her marketing background and where she sees the future of marketing going and learn some more about her experiences. So without further ado, Betsy, would you like to just tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Sure. So thanks so much for having me. It's fun to be here. As you mentioned, I am currently the Chief Marketing Officer of Dry Soda. We're a small company out of Seattle, Washington. And we are on a mission to extend social drinking for everyone and really change and elevate non-alcoholic options within the marketplace. So it's been a wonderful few years being there. At the core, I consider myself a purpose-driven marketer who sees marketing as really like old school in CPG, the central of the hub. So the general marketer and the strategy driver as well. And so, as you mentioned, I was at General Mills for a number of years. I had the fortune of working on brands like Cheerios and Yoplait, Old El Paso, but then also looking at businesses from other sides of working on strategic growth relationships with our customers and how do we drive growth on a retail basis or rethink innovation and really bring the entrepreneurial mindset inside to larger companies to do more breakthrough innovation. So I love, my background has this experience of startups, big companies, with a combination of kind of entrepreneurship and intrapreneurship to tackle big problems and turn businesses around.
Well, that's a great background, Betsy. So we really appreciate that. So in terms of, the marketers, so as you've been in this, marketing background for the last, 15 years or so, it seems like few roles within an organization have changed as much as what a marketer has over that time. So with whether it be increasing channels, greater customer expectations, increased advertising costs, how have you in your various roles used a combination of technology, people, and processes to combat these changes within your organization to be successful?
I think it's changed differently for different organizations based on how they see marketing within the role. At General Mills, the role continued to fluctuate from as social media became a major channel or media vehicle. How do you build that into large brands that are used to buying media, getting return on investment, being able to put things into a marketing mix? And how does the brand manager manage that with what is a growing influence of a marketing communications role as well? And so, going back and forth of how much of the general management should sit on the business versus how growth focused are we? Is it management focused or is it growth focused? And I think those two things set up where your people, processes, and technology sit in, right? Because you're looking to both optimize what you're doing on the existing business, but I think more and more as marketers, we're being pushed to be the growth drivers and find the new audiences, ideas, and connect to where people are. And that inherently is changing. So it's not just one retail environment. What does e-com look like in your mix? Is it about loyalty and really creating an experience for the people that have the most loyalty to you that you can mine and learn from? Or is it going to actually be a growth channel? And depending on how you see that within your mix, you're using your tools and your teams differently. And it kind of dictates, I think it looks different for each brand, but really thinking of like, what is the role of this? Is it something I need to have an internal competency on, or can I outsource that and then leverage the data coming in? And in a world of a lot of data, it's the integration of that data to make big decisions, which is still, I think, lagging in a lot of CPG, because if your data is coming mostly through retail, it's not being tied back to a consumer, getting to ROIs. And there's a number of incredible tools out there that are really starting to tie activity and digital activity to actual physical ROIs and actions, which is new. And media companies are getting more savvy on what that looks like and how to tie it for the big brands. You know, today, I grew up in that world where there's kind of all the data, and the question is which areas do you really want to mine and look at and figure out what is meaningful to your brand. On a small brand, which we are a small company, the question in our organization is really around channel, and how do you want to incorporate e-com into your channel, and then what kind of expertise and people you need to bring into that. I think every brand now has a social manager, right? That is something that like has to be a part of how you articulate your brand. And even 5 years ago, that was not true. People were kind of outsourcing little pieces of that. And so as ubiquitous as social manager has become, I think that e-com role is becoming ubiquitous at small companies in particular as well, just because the challenge to get to market is different in e-com than you just have to find your consumers versus getting into retail channels. The talent is probably behind the need. And so the ability to actually afford the talent and expertise within the D2C space is hard to find. And so it's about finding, for me right now, outsourcing and finding the right teams and partners to outsource with that can help refine the data, come in, help us make decisions and move forward. Because it is, for the most part, it is a totally different way of operating the business, making real-time changes in investments, and thinking about how to build that in a profitable way. I mean, I started in D2C back at the Motley Fool. Our model was completely D2C, and while the fundamentals of the practice are the same, the subtleties of the technology, the tools, the apps, the plugins is totally different today on how you build a store, manage a store, and get the data through. So it's shifting, and I think it's shifting on about an every 6 month basis on what's new, what I should be relying on, and particularly on what's changing in Facebook and Instagram, where a year ago, social media buys were like the most effective thing you could do, and now they're falling off the cliff because of their cost and return. So you're like, okay, just staying on top of that has required, I think, more external commitment to partners than before, because one person can't hold all of the change and adapt on their own.
With data being so centralized that, we kind of see that as the connective tissue between different lines of business. So whether you're talking about your e-commerce team, your marketing team, your operations team, your distribution teams, marketing's at the central of all that with that data. So can you tell us about how you've used technology and data to really facilitate the growth objectives that you guys are trying to do at Dry Soda, as well as other places maybe in the past? But, what do you guys do in that space to make sure that you're able to use data in the right way with technology to drive the business forward?
Yeah, we've really had to consolidate it into who is the owner of the data. I would say one of the fallacies is more data is better, and that the more people who are touching it and playing with it is the better. And there's a point that is true if we are looking at the same thing. And so at Dry, we are small, but it's interesting. We had a lot of people with different versions of the truth. And so bringing in a brand manager who can actually synthesize what we're looking for, ask people for their opinions, and as a company, we can together decipher what's going on and where we need to go and pull out insights of that together has been super helpful. It has driven us to be more cohesive around our purpose and focused on where we're trying to win. And we use a combination of just like market data, of course, like how are you performing, what's competitive look like, and then we've been supplementing it with a lot of consumer insights work, both through, literally just our social footprint of feeding in what is working, what people are responding to. And then the third leg is actually going out and getting information from consumers and doing more frequent pulse kind of surveys on various topics, which we still do kind of like deep consumer qualitative, and we have those set up to kind of go deeper and figure out what's underneath stuff. But we are now collectively taking all three of those sources and looking at them all together to say, oh, we need to pivot here, or that looks different than what we thought. A good example is we have been working on a new product innovation, and we did a pulse survey with our existing consumer base, because that would be our our first target, and got different interest levels and feedback on the idea, and then did our kind of general market pulse survey and found that our audience is 80% female, and the interest in this new product was 70% male. And so the initial feedback we were getting from people in our deep kind of conversations was like completely the wrong audience. And so, for us as a small company, we're just taking skims of data to then put thought and reflection against it to make quick pivots, and doing that on a weekly to monthly basis.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. So I know one thing that we've seen when you talk about the source of truth with so many different data sources, whether that be first-party data or third-party data, there's a lot of versions of the source of truth. So I read a study recently that surveyed chief marketing officers and said that only 40% of the time that they make decisions, they're doing it based on data. And I'm sure you, with your data and analytics background, obviously you guys do that more, but I know it's tough nonetheless. So do you have any recommendations for how you've been able to use data to incorporate into your decision-making process, whether that be on a campaign basis or a strategy basis?
Yeah, it's funny, like that 40% of people are not using data. I could see that, because I think that there was at least for me in traditional CPG marketing, I think that there was a time during the early 2000s, maybe late 90s into early 2000s, where people stopped creating and relied on data to give them answers. So they stopped thinking, that's very harsh, I didn't mean it that way, but like, I'll do a test and I'll get a qualitative answer, or the ROI will totally tell me where to move my money and move stuff around. And it became more templatized and equation-based in the way that marketers thought about data. And that in the last bunch of years, at least when I was at Mills, we were talking a lot about, data is important, but you also have to have the purpose, the fingertips. You have to understand the marketplace to be able to bring the creativity and unlock what the brand can do from how it shows up in the world. And so that swing in the survey to me is very interesting. I think that the in that kind of balance of understanding like consumers, the marketplace, and what you're trying to do from your intuition, and really be able to build that, and then use data to understand where the opportunities and gaps are. So like, you can want your product to deliver and you share it with a whole bunch of people, and if the data says that people don't like it, people don't like it, and you need it to pivot. And so what it can do is help you get to great. And then I also think especially, in the world of where we're getting more return and more information on our media spends and our mix, on, return on ad spend, is that it can then help us make much better decisions on how to build profitable, sustainable businesses by thinking about our mix very differently. Now, not using the data as a crutch to say yes or no, because I don't think, because then you're losing what is the bigger picture, but using it to optimize actually the business model to increase return. So to me, those are the two places of it brings you back from to reality of what your gut might tell you, so you can make sure that you're still delivering against what you're trying to do, and then really optimizing where we should be playing, because we can read it now and we can see. And it also can help us, I think, more efficiently find new consumers and drive penetration in a different way as we look to kind of mirror buyer profiles, and it just makes us more efficient in fishing for people.
You got to understand your consumer, and then using data to kind of validate some of those assumptions and making sure you're staying on the right path. And I know it keeps getting tougher and tougher for marketers, especially with some of the legal changes that are going on, and some of the privacy laws and consumer preferences being so important, especially obviously your company being based on the West Coast, and some of the things that you see with California, as well as I'm guessing maybe you guys sell into Canada a little bit as well. But how have you guys seen with some of the shifts in privacy laws and consumer preferences, and the elimination of even things like third-party cookies here in the near future, with those browsers that still have them? How is that going to impact marketers, and what should they consider doing to prepare for those changes that are going to come upon us with some of those new laws?
Yeah, I mean, what we've been able to do in the last few years is more efficiently create an environment of consumer surround, right? So the psychology is, if someone has to see something 3 times from 3 different mindsets or in 3 different ways before it starts to click as even a toggle in your brain. And so what cookie technology has allowed us to do is to make that surround so much easier, right? Because someone opts in or raises their hand in some way that shows an interest, and then you can follow them. And not in a predatory way, but really in a way that has made it efficient to create that surround, where before you were doing a profile of a person and then trying to piece together where the media would intersect within their lifestyle to create that brand impression. So, it's not like we haven't been here before. In fact, we only have had the ability to truly follow people, or to give or to serve multiple brand impressions for a few years, right? And so it's kind of going back to the theory of what is the true consumer journey, what is their path to discovery, and making sure that we are shoring up touch points along that consumer journey or consideration set. So it really, I think, at the core, goes back to knowing who you're going after and what truly motivates them. It should make us more creative, and it should make us know people better. That being said, it's going to be hard because it is more expensive to hit multiple touch points in different ways than what we're doing today. And so that's going to be the trade-off that, we're starting to think through now of okay, what's the next generation of kind of surround, and how can we do that in ways that fits with consumers' desire for privacy and not wanting to get brand impressions in the way that it looks like today. So it's a little bit like, if you stay grounded in what we know and how you reach consumers and the theory, then I think it's a lot easier to find the next level of tool that will help us kind of show up and create the brand impressions we need.
Definitely. I'd like to go back to something that you mentioned a little bit earlier in the interview about, finding the right people to do the types of things that you need to do in order to market to people today. I know, like, some recent reports that I've seen is that in a lot of cases the CMO is spending just as much or more on technology than what the CIO is doing. So as your technology becomes a bigger mix of what marketers do, how are you making sure that your marketing team has the right skills and or partners that you can bring in, whether that's your internal IT team or third-party consultants, to really maximize their use of that technology to create the efficiency to kind of do more with less? How are you guys really trying to tackle that today when things are going so fast, and making sure that they're staying up ahead and you're maximizing the tools that are out there with your team?
Yeah, I'm doing it. I mean, as mentioned, like as a small team, I'm not hiring in a lot of that expertise. But what I'm doing is I have consultants that I trust that are out there kind of doing a lot of the vetting, number one, and I am integrating them into my team. And so they are operating with our team as if they are a part of our team. And why that is important is because the internal team has to be like, they may not have to have all the details, but they have to be just as aware of what's happening and how we're starting to integrate that and use decision making and change the way that they're operating. So for me, the easiest way to do it is to infuse it from the outside, but actually infuse it and not just kind of outsource it. So that's number one. The second is I find great value in crowdsourcing. I'm a member of a CMO forum, and that is incredibly helpful of what are other people doing, what are they touching, what are the vendors they're touching, and we use that as a place to crowdsource what one person may be finding in another, because there's a proliferation not only of like technology changing and whatever, but vendors and new vendors and, quick agile people who know this one thing and are able to do that, but can they do everything else? And really leveraging networks of professionals outside the organization to create more of a net to catch what's happening. So those two are the core. And then, I'm looking at different profiles of people is the other one. My brand manager has historical brand manage, like CPG type experience, but she actually also has IT. She has one of a jack of all trades background that may not have hit my radar in the same way in the past that, you need traditional experience here. Like, I'm looking for people who now have had hybrid roles or have touched different parts of the business, but aren't just specialists in their own right, to bring internal, because those are the people that are able to connect to the external, whether it's consultants or experts, in a different way and bring them in, because they can make different connections just between what they're working on and what it could be.
Great insight. Well, we really appreciate all the time that you've given us today. Just had one last question, kind of a fun one going out the door. So I think of, my daughter is about 10 years old. She was born right around the time that Instagram came to be, and it quickly became a billion-dollar company, was bought by Facebook. So, technology just changes so quickly in such a short period of time. If you were going to put on your prognosticator hat and kind of think, where are we going to be 10 years from now? As marketers, what type of technology is out there? What are you most excited about, or how different will we look a decade from now, going into the future?
Well, gosh, that's fun. I guess there's kind of two things. I think that this idea of like virtual brand experiences will follow us everywhere. And so you will no longer consume media the way that we do, that it will go with you. So you could have a brand experience truly in store. You could have it, ocularly, you could have it through a phone or whatever device that looks like. But as marketers, we'll actually have to figure out how to complement your real life experiences versus have you consume brand experiences, if that makes sense. And so really, will become a part of how people interact with the world, and that experiential place or and not just like being at events or stuff like that, but literally how the brand can come to life in a digital surround type way and surround you at the key moments is going to be how people make deep relationships. The other is, I think the power ends up more in the consumer's hands of how are they going to curate brands and discover things. And that it's going to be easier to drive discovery of new things and make new connections. I mean, we see it right now of what's happened over just the COVID year of the like jumpstart of small brands launching on e-commerce and hitting specialized needs. And I think that will increase, and the way that people will be able to curate and find brands will be on them. And so how we are able to connect to people and be a part of their curation process is different than advertising. And it is actually different than, buying digital ads or stuff like that. It's really going to be how do you make sure that you're part of what I think is going to be larger curators for consumers, and people looking to, whether it's technology, people, or organizations, to curate those brands for them.
Well, that is tremendous insight. So we really appreciate your time, Betsy Frost from Dry Soda. Thank you so much. Is there any details that if anybody wanted to get a hold of you about your brand, or to reach out to you, is there any way that you'd like to offer them to reach out to you for more information?
Yeah, absolutely. You can find us at drinkdry.com, and you can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm Betsy Frost.